Hi, everyone. Happy Friday. Welcome to Art School Live with Eric Rhodes, minus Eric Rhodes. I am 𝗪𝗏 𝗫𝗏, and I'm filling in for Eric this week. And surprise, I'm filling in next week, too. So you are not rid of me yet. For all of those of you who are new to Art School Live, welcome. We're so glad you joined us today. And I am 𝗪𝗏 𝗫𝗏. I have been with Streamline Publishing for almost 13 years. I wear a lot of hats here. I am project manager. I am manager for the Plein Air Salon art competition. And I am also the community ambassador for Pastel Today, our newsletter for all things pastel. Kelly Kane does a fantastic job editing our newsletter and writing those articles. And then I fill in from time to time with community news, things that are going on in the pastel world that I want to share with you. And today I'm excited because we have a pastel artist with us today, and she's going to be sharing with us some fun things, and I am super excited. So let's bring in our guest, Takeyce Walter. Hi, Takeyce, how are you?
Hi, Carrie. I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm good. Where are you located?
I'm located in upstate New York,
Oh,
just
okay.
south of the Adirondacks.
Oh, nice. That's a very pretty area, I've heard.
Yeah, it is. It's gorgeous.
Wonderful. What do you plan to share with us today?
Well, today we're going to be working on a pastel that shows a technique of painting moving water. And as I mentioned, I live close to the Adirondacks, so a lot of my work is inspired by the region. There are thousands of lakes and rivers that I visit every year, and I'm inspired by. So I thought, being that it was snowing here today, I would do a snow scene with a stream that's kind of rippling and has a lot of like surface activity going on. I'm going to be working on a 10 by 10 sheet of pastel paper. And yeah, the focus is just trying to get all of those interesting texture that happens on the water surface. And I'm excited to be here.
I'm very excited that you agreed to come on, and I'm actually really excited for this. I think two of my favorite paintings that I've done have been of water, and because I did them along with a demo, but when I've tried to do it outside of following along with someone, it's not as easy. So I'm really excited to hear this today. So why don't we go ahead and get this show started? We're going to have Amandine roll that video.
It's Art School Live with Eric Rhodes. Now, here's your host, Eric Rhodes.
𝗪𝗏 𝗫𝗏. Welcome everyone to Art School Live. Eric is still on vacation this week, and fun fact, he's going to be hosting Watercolor Live next week, so you're stuck with me for one more week. I'm so sorry. I am so happy to be here today. We have a pastel artist that is going to be showing us how to capture those what do you want to call them? The ripples, the texture, the moving water in pastel, which is such a fun thing. Look at that. That is awesome. I definitely struggle with this when I paint with pastel. So I am really excited for this demo to hear how this is all going to play out. So this is going to be wonderful. And this artist is Takeyce Walter. Some of you who attended Pastel Live last year may have seen her on a faculty. She was the artist for Blick Art Materials. So I am super excited for this demo. So without further ado, I am going to turn it over to Takeyce and let her take it away.
Thank you so much, Carrie. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I am so excited to get started on this demo for you today. And before we get started, I'll show you the reference image I'm working from. So it's a pretty interesting scene of a stream in the Adirondacks at winter time. And what I really love about this piece is the beautiful undulations that are happening on the water surface. Also, the beautiful rocks that are kind of, the water's a little transparent here, but it's just very subtle movement. And it reminded me of one of my favorite painters, 𝗪𝗹𝗁 is how you say his name, I believe. He's, I believe, a Swedish master painter, and he from the early 20th century, and he painted water beautifully. And I actually have an example. I'll show you. I did a copy of one of his works. Okay, sorry as I break things in my studio, reaching for this. This is an example of one of his works. Is called The Watermill, I believe, and I did a copy of this a number of years ago. But I just love the way he paints moving water, and that reference image kind of reminded me of his work. So I decided to try that for today. So I've started off on a piece of 10 by 10 sanded pastel paper, and I've used a little gouache to do like a warm undertone. I tend to use my color wheel, and if the finished piece, so the local colors are mostly greens, I'll do a warm undertone to just help to add some depth and some contrast to the final piece. And so I chose to do that today. And let's get started, because I know we have.
So I'm curious because
Sure.
Jeff actually talked about this on Wednesday, using gouache as an underpainting for pastel, which I'd never done before. Do you keep it pretty watery?
It is, yeah. So I've used it in a few ways. So I've used it where it's really watery, and I only use it as kind of like a wash, just to tone the surface. But I've also used it where I've done the wash, but then I've gone on top of it with mixing the local colors with gouache in a very abstract application, and then going on top of it with the pastels. So on here, for example, if I were to do that other process, I would first have this layer, and then once that was dry, then I would quickly block in like the medium tone of the greens that are here with gouache. Very loose, not as watery, but with thicker paint. And also keeping in mind to leave some of this beautiful warm pink and reds showing through, because I don't want to cover it in its entirety. And then go on top with the pastels. Actually, I have on my my business card, one of my business cards, this is an example of that technique.
Ooh, look at how vibrant that is.
Yeah, isn't that neat? With the I just love like the little relationships that the yellows and the reds underneath, you can see kind of like in this area. Just leaving some of that visible just adds interest to the finished piece. Yeah. All right, so I'm going to start off with this. My focus area for today is going to be right here in the water. So I'm going to be very abstract with everything surrounding. So I'll start off by just loosely adding in some tones with this background. This is the distant part of the shoreline here is kind of on a hill, and half of it is a little bit more vertical than the other, leading down to the stream. So that part was more illuminated, hence the lighter, warmer tone I'm using for the snow.
I like that you're not being too worried about covering the trees that you've got painted there.
Yeah. No, I
definitely would try to like go in between all those.
Yeah, you know, when I teach, my students always ask about that as well. And I always tell them that when I do a sketch like this, it's kind of practice. It's like you're getting muscle memory.
Mm-hmm.
So it's okay if you end up covering things that you've done, because you've done it already. You know that, there's still little ghosts of them visible. So you still are, cognizant of where they should be.
Mm-hmm.
So you can always come back and
put them back in if you want them.
Put them back in. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. This scene, it's very green. There's even some green reflected in the snow, which makes sense, right? Because it's surrounded by these pines.
Yeah.
But if you were to think, if I didn't have my reference, you think you're painting snow and shadow, I don't know if I would think about adding green into the snow. But it's a really neat thing about observation and painting. It's like paint what you see, not what you think, or not what you think you know. And somehow it comes together and works out in the end. Okay. Again, I'm just going to apply these tones, very abstract. It's a little dark for there. And right now, once I've gotten the initial values of the snow, now I'm trying to just suggest these glacial erratics, these huge boulders. One thing I did want to mention, that if any viewer has any questions, feel free to, I guess you could type in a comment field or something. And
yes, I just responded to one.
Okay, good.
We're just watching very intently as this comes together.
Yeah. Thank you.
So when you're painting, do you always work background to foreground?
I do. I think that helps with the depth and the placement of the objects, overlapping. I've just found that the piece ends up just feeling more authentic that way.
Yeah.
And sometimes there are times where I'll put in all the darks first and then kind of move around or go back to working from back to the foreground. But I like working that way. And with pastels, oftentimes right now I'm working flat. For your viewing pleasure is what my setup is in my studio. But normally, sometimes I'll work with the pastel vertically on an easel.
And do you prefer it that way because of the way the dust falls down?
Yeah, I do prefer it that way. I mean, I'm working on a sanded surface so that there really isn't a tremendous amount of dust that that I lose, but I do like if any does fall, that it's stuff that I'll be able to cover, and my brights wouldn't get any darks falling into it. But actually, this way works pretty nicely as well for that. All right. Just now, trying to move on to get to that water because that's what we're all here for. So moving on to the water, I am probably going to start establishing some of these darks first instead of moving from top down. I want to get this value in this area right. And because it's really pretty nice, it looks like a very cool, trying to figure out the value that's there. It's pretty warm. So I am going to start off by just deepening that red a bit. And I'm looking for...
So we have someone asking, the pigment in the underpainting, what kind of gouache pigment did you use for that? Was that a pink or a red?
Yeah, I made a mixture of primary red and permanent white, and some of it has a touch of this permanent yellow deep.
Ooh, I like the permanent yellow deep. That's a nice color.
Yeah.
I've never used permanent white though. What's the difference between that and titanium white or zinc?
I think it's just it feels to me a little bit warmer than zinc, and maybe most similar to titanium.
Oh, interesting.
Titanium is what I usually use on my oil painting palette. Or yeah, I do work in oils and gouache as well as pastels. So titanium, permanent white seems to be analogous to titanium.
Okay. So with you working in multiple mediums, do you feel like painting in pastel informs your oil painting or oil informs pastel or anything like that?
That's a great question, Carrie.
I've never used oil, so I have no preference for it.
My oil, so I learned how to paint with oils, and I tried pastels about 4 years after I started working with oils. And I fell in love with pastels because of the reason why many of us do. It's immediacy, the vibrance, the color clarity. I just loved that I could do a painting similar to how I would work with oils, but in a fraction of the time. So, but I found that my pastels and my oils are while you can see and kind of see my hand in them, they are pretty distinct, I would say. My pastels tend to be more textured and I would say more impressionistic or expressive even. And my oils tend to be a little bit tighter, like more fine. And my gouache are, I mean, they are Gouache is now like probably my new favorite because it's a combination. I'll show you. I have a couple of them sitting here. These are some tiny ones.
Oh, I love those. Those are so
So
cool.
tiny. I can do what I do with oils and pastels with gouache in like even faster. And just I'm having fun with gouache and using, you know, the tinier brushes and just getting more more depth in those paintings in a shorter time. But I do find, I know you asked if like one informs the other, and I don't know, I just feel like they're all very different.
Yeah.
Yeah, but if I find that if I want to work larger, I'll default to oils. And if
Yeah,
I
I've
want
heard
to,
that from a couple of other artists who paint in multiple
mm-hmm,
mediums, that the larger
yeah,
ones tend to be oil.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And if I want to work really small, but I want to get a lot of fine detail, then I'll default to gouache.
Mm-hmm.
And then pastels are really like, I just love playing, but my pastels are more again like loose and expressive. I'm just trying to set the groundwork here.
I really like how this green has kind of made that background snowbank pop a little bit. You can really
Yeah,
start to see the green in that more.
yeah, yeah. Thank you. Yeah, I love the layering that you can do with pastels. So as I'm trying to get just like a base color to kind of cover up a lot of this undertone, I'm keeping in mind the beautiful transparency that's going on here with
Mm-hmm.
the rocks that are there. So trying to add some warmth and then layer. I love the play of the red and the green, and I love bringing in
Yeah.
violets as well.
Ooh, I love that little pop of blue.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you. And keep in mind that the snowbank, this bank area is kind of reflecting down. So instead of going for like a white, which would seem instinctive maybe,
Mm-hmm.
I'm going for a lighter green there at first. And then I can bring in paler blue even to enhance those reflections of the snow. There's a light rock right under here. Do not want to grab a white pastel pencil just as a reminder. I don't want to lose the reflection of this rock here.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just going to make a note for that. That's too dark.
So when you're trying to capture that movement of water while putting in
Mhm.
reflections and all that kind of stuff, are you always working either vertical or horizontal?
Yes. Yeah, I find that laying in the groundwork first, I usually use these vertical strokes. And sometimes I'll do like a crosshatch, but with the large side of the pastel. And then as I get to the final details, then I'll switch to more refined and vertical. I'm sorry, horizontal strokes. I'm always trying to vary the marks that I make in pastels. I know sometimes I have beginner students. They tend to work like, very fine starting off very early in the process.
Yeah.
I always have to remind them. I remember where I heard this. It may have been from my good friend 𝗪𝗁𝗲𝗿. You know Karen.
Oh, I love Karen.
Yeah, she I think it was her who had said, when folks ask like how they can loosen up with their painting, that you should start, when you start a piece, your movement should be coming from like your shoulders, right? Like
Oh, interesting.
should be making like big marks, and then as you progress within the painting, then you can move to your movements primarily coming from your elbow, and then save all of this wrist action for like fine details.
Very
And
smart.
somehow, yeah, that stuck to me. It stuck out, and I was like, oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And it's helped me to just remain loose where I need to be in the process. It's very tempting to try to get to these details too soon, right away.
Yeah, I definitely have that problem.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Just bringing in some of this violet to help with some of these darker reflections coming off the shoreline.
Is this a hard pastel that you've switched to?
Yeah, this is a harder pastel. It's probably, I have them all, most of the wrappers are off except for these ones, the 9000s.
I could kind of tell by the sound. So I know
sound.
I'll use the harder pastels to kind of blend in a little bit
Yes.
on top.
Yeah. Yeah. They're great for that. Yeah, I have a variety of pastels that I use on my palette. I'll share that if anybody's interested. It's basically a box that's organized. Maybe this will be a better way. From light to dark, warm and cool, organized normally. This is that's my small travel box. I have a larger box on the other side of my studio. And I tend to usually start off with the harder pastels and then save the really soft babies for towards the end. I do realize now that I need to kind of gray out some of this middle ground here. So I'm coming in with like a pretty neutral green. And that is also going to help me make this here is my foreground. So just again, thinking about depth, keeping objects and elements that are in the background a little bit looser, less detailed, a little grayer, and then getting more vibrant as you come towards the foreground here. I'm starting to just kind of have a couple of suggestions of the ripples starting here. I'm going to bring in some violet. Violet works well with green because it helps to kind of neutralize it a bit, especially in areas that you need to just kind of drop the chroma a bit.
Susan is asking, do you ever use pan pastels?
I have, but I find that for my landscapes, because I like to keep it pretty textured, I find that the pan pastels are really good for paintings that are, I'll show you an example of one, that are really like smooth.
Ooh, yeah,
and you know, this one has a beautiful gradation. The pan pastels are really good for something like this. But for things where I need, and maybe I'm not completely fully experienced with pan pastels as I am with the sticks. So maybe it's just a learning curve. But I'm not able to get like really fine, you know, edges if I need to with them. Maybe that's just more practice that's needed on my part. Okay. Kind of coming in here, trying to save like my big textures for this area. Yeah. Sometimes I have to wipe my pastels to figure out what color they are. Yes, I needed this one. Sometimes you have to break them to get a smaller edge. It's like grabbing a smaller brush.
We've got about 15, 20 more minutes.
That's incredible. That's amazing how quickly that time flew by.
Right?
All right, all right. So I'm gonna turn on the jets now. Let's kind of bring this to a good spot. I'm gonna get my little snow here. I think. That's amazing, Carrie. When did that time go by so quick?
I know, right? Time flies when you're in the zone.
Yeah, yeah. Oh my goodness. I know my husband always calls my studio like a time machine. So I say I'll be an hour in the studio and I emerge 4 days later. But I appreciate you telling me that because there's nothing like working under pressure.
Right?
It really helps to move things along quickly.
One thing I've learned too is watching you paint the snow is I've learned that early on with pastel that snow is not white. As much as you think it is, it's never ever white.
Nope. Nope. There's blues, there's green, it's highly reflective. So
Yeah.
whatever's around it, that's the colors that will be in there. Okay. So what I really want to try to get here are these beautiful ripples. So part of me just wants to get all of these beautiful little rocks in. I'll have to work on that later. So for the ripples, I'm gonna try to grab a medium value, a dark value, and a light value for the greens.
Takeyce, could you move your camera down a little bit or move your painting surface up a little bit? We can't quite see the bottom.
Oh, the bottom? Okay.
Yeah.
Sure. Let me, let's see. Hold on.
There we go. That's better.
This is a little tricky though. This holder is kind of okay. Let's try something. I'm just gonna kind of put it on top of here. Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, it's a little precarious on there. So coming in with this lighter green. And what I'm doing here is kind of just pulling it across the surface.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm trying to lift it as I pull. So I'm not just making horizontal lines. I'm trying to add some variety and some broken strokes. I'm gonna make this to reflect this boulder here. I need it darker. So as I'm adding these strokes, I'm thinking about how, the different planes of a ripple. So there are always three, right? Well, technically four, but we see three. There's the crest of the ripple, which is usually where the highlights are. And then in front of that is usually really vibrant, like it's reflecting whatever's under the water.
Mm-hmm.
And then on the back side of it is it's reflecting what's behind it.
Interesting. I
So,
never thought about it that way. I was just always putting white lines on top of
it. Yeah. It's interesting to, I spend a lot of time on the water and just observing and making notes because I'm, weird in that way. But it is fascinating to especially waves, to see how, the different planes and the different ways that they reflect light. And I try to have that in mind when I'm painting water. There's a beautiful little grayish blue reflection of the sky here that I do want to capture.
So let's say you're doing this and you put one down and you don't like it. It's either too horizontal or it's too something.
Mm-hmm.
How would you fix it?
Easy. You could either rub it out with a finger, like if like let's say this one, it's a little bit too dark. You can kind of rub it in with your finger and then come back with either another color or a different stroke. That's the amazing thing about pastel, and I find this with all the media that I use, is that they're very forgiving. There's no mark that you can't just erase or go over. And
maybe I just overthink it so much that because I always end up ruining it and then getting frustrated. So I must just be overthinking it.
Yeah, if I do a mark that I just say, okay, it needs to be either covered up or removed.
I love those
try
little pops
again.
of orange.
Yeah, it's amazing the variation of color that's under this surface here. And I just love like what's happening in here. So let me really try to get that going. Sometimes I'll bring this little buddy out. As a reminder, because the water quality is very similar.
Interesting.
Do you ever do that? Like when
I
you're
don't have
doing a
enough
painting
surrounding me in order to do that.
Yeah, but I love using, either my work, like older pieces that I have that I feel worked out, as inspiration to have near me if I'm doing something that's a little challenging, just to help me remember, like, oh, you've done this before.
That's a good idea.
It out again. Yeah. Yeah. And sometimes if I'm studying a particular artist, I did this a lot in undergrad. If I was studying a particular artist, to get as much of their reproductions of their work as possible to study. And it's amazing because the masters, they make it look so easy, right?
Right?
And you try to do it and you're like, oh. That is a challenge. All right, get some of this in here. A little darkness in there that I was missing. So you're starting to see, starting to happen where you're getting some motion here in this water surface.
Yeah, you can really see it.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Being mindful of making sure that I tend to, this is a habit I think we all have, or I think is a feature, where when we put a mark down, sometimes I find that I end up trying to make order out of disorder.
Mm-hmm.
So like if I put a stroke here, that's why I try to move my pastel around. And if I'm using a brush, I try to move it around and move my hand so I'm at least making different marks,
Mm-hmm.
because we'll have this tendency to just make everything very orderly. So if I put a stroke here, then I would put maybe like the same shape, size, stroke right next to it, and I have to remind myself that no.
Someone is asking if you could talk about the 3 or 4 parts of the ripples again, the crest and then the foreground, background.
Sure. Yeah. So, looking at water that's moving, I try to just always think about the various planes of a ripple or a wave.
Mm-hmm.
So there's the top, which is the crest, right? And that's where you're going to get highlights like these. And then the front plane, typically, and it depends also the angle that you're looking at. But in this sense, where we're kind of looking down, the front plane is almost like a mirror or like a window to what's underneath. So that area will be pretty much pretty vibrant. It's going to be reflecting what's directly underneath, and then the back plane is going to be reflecting what's behind. So generally, I find in terms of, and again, it depends on what's around, but I find that the top is usually the lightest value,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's your highlight, and the front is usually your darkest value because it's kind of like a window to what's below, and you're
Mm-hmm.
seeing like all of the shadows and various rocks and chromatic. It's very chromatic, so you can see. So if you're doing like a sea wave, it's going to be, that's why like when you see a wave crest, right below the crest, it looks so beautiful, and for the ocean, like beautiful and blue, and you really get that turquoisey color if you're in a tropical ocean. And then behind it, it's going to be like a mid value. It's going to be a little bit grayer and darker because it's not getting that light that's on top or in the foreground. So yeah, so that's how I try to think of those things as I'm painting and trying to capture what I feel like just the impossible sometimes. It's just so beautiful, and trying to recreate that is, it's I need to simplify it, and that's one way to do that. It's just everything, everything that you paint, and you're painting planes, and it's the plane's reaction to light. That's basically it, right? Easy, right?
Yes.
But this is the kind of theme or image that I could just spend hours and hours and hours on. There's just so much to see and express. Just kind of pulling this lighter pastel across. The other thing too that is good to do. So in this section here, where I have, you know, it's a suggestion of the shadow of this boulder, this rock that's on the surface.
Mm-hmm.
Just, you know, taking, I'll break that one, so I need a little smaller. Taking a pastel and just kind of
You just gave
dragging
everyone anxiety breaking the pastel.
I know. Oh my goodness.
You just did that so quick without even a thought.
That's something I learned very early on. I cannot be precious with these pastels.
Yes, I did too. My very first box of 𝗪𝗏𝗏𝗏 wigs, I kept them so pristine for so long. And finally I was like, nope, I got to break them in half. So now that's the first thing I do as soon as I get new pastels is just immediately break them.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
So sorry, anyway, you were talking about the boulder.
Yes. Yeah, I just, you know, so I had the suggestion of the shadow of the boulder there, but just coming over it, just, and this is like how, you know, I try to add depth, just kind of going over it with this lighter pastel really then kind of like pushes it even deeper, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then brings the highlight. Just, it's obvious that these smaller strokes on top are, you know, at the surface level, and then that now is beneath the surface.
So we've got a couple more minutes. So I have another question for you. So in your background, you can see a lot of the underpainting still. Would you typically leave that there, or would you still finish this up?
Oh no, I will definitely be working on this to bring it to a more finished point. I did not spend as much time as I wanted.
Okay,
I wanted to really
just was
focus
curious.
here. Yeah, because I know the focus of today is the smoothing water. So I really wanted to spend as much of our time as possible there. But I will, when I finish this, Carrie, I'll send it to you if you want to add it to the comments.
Yes, we will. We did have
You
some
could do
questions
that.
about that.
Yeah. So folks can see how I'll take this to the finish line. But yeah, I will definitely just kind of fine tune these rocks here. Definitely want to add these trees, these pines, all of the beautiful things that are happening in the background with those trees. And I love the little rocks that are here as well. So I'll finish this. This won't be as detailed as down here because again, this is our focus.
Right.
But I will definitely bring this probably another 60% to completion.
Very cool.
Yeah.
So for all of you guys watching, we did drop, Karen put Takeyce's website in the chat, and then also follow her on Instagram. She always posts a lot of beautiful paintings. Keep her in mind. And then also she's actually going to be on faculty for Pastel Live next year, or I guess rather it's later this year. We're super excited about. So be sure to sign up for that. And then I also have, so something else I want to mention because I haven't mentioned it in a while is we have an ebook called 45 Pastel Pointers from the Pros. And there's some bonus podcasts and art school live videos in there. So check that out if you're interested. And then we can't announce it just yet, but I do have something special that we are working on for pastel artists. So if you want to be alerted of that when it comes out, be sure to sign up for our newsletter because we will announce it there. It's coming in the next couple of months and I'm super excited about it. So you're definitely going to want to sign up for that so you get notified.
Excellent.
This is gorgeous.
Thank you. Thank
So what
you.
are you doing there with the pastel pencil?
So I'm taking this pastel pencil and just kind of just randomly, see, I'm trying not to be too precise. Here in this foreground area, I love what's happening with the rocks underneath. So I'm just using, it's a black pastel pencil, and I'm using it to just carve in some of those shadows.
Oh,
That
interesting.
helps, yeah, that just helps to kind of define um, a few of these rocks and deepen some shadows here. It's almost like the pastel that I've already put on top, I am imagining them or observing them as they are, and then seeking where the shadows are, and then just kind of adding those little areas just to add a little bit more depth to this foreground. And I don't need to do a whole lot. I just need to just kind of suggest some areas, and you can see how they just kind of start emerging. Like that one that just kind of came out of nowhere. It's like it just said, "Here I am."
That is so cool.
Yeah. Thank you.
Well, we've come to the end of our show today. Thank you everyone so much for
Alright.
watching. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel. That way you get notified when we go live. We go live on YouTube every day at noon. For those of you who are new, you can also follow Eric Rhodes on Instagram. And don't forget to follow Takeyce on Instagram so you get to see all of her beautiful paintings. And when she finally finishes this one, we will post it in the comments so that you guys can all check out the finished product. Takeyce, thank you so much for coming today and doing this demo. This was awesome. And I'm super excited now to try and go paint some water.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Carrie. It's been a pleasure. Thank you for having me. And thanks to everyone who stopped by.
Yeah, thank you guys all so much. And don't forget that I'm going to be hosting again next week. So we'll have some new artists for you. And I hope you all have a wonderful weekend. Take care, guys. Bye.